In the heart of a silent forest in France, where the trees stood like ancient witnesses, lay a forgotten piece of history, a place that had once captured the world's attention. The air around this spot felt heavy, almost as if it still held the echoes of a moment that changed the course of time. Yet, few people today even knew it existed. It was here, in this secluded clearing, that the bloodiest conflict of its time, World War I, finally came to an end. But why this spot? Why did the leaders of two warring nations, desperate to end years of unimaginable suffering, travel to this hidden place deep in the Compiègne Forest? On the morning of November 11, 1918, as fog crept through the forest and the world held its breath, a group of men arrived, each carrying the weight of millions of lives. They were representatives of the Allied powers and Germany, meeting face to face after years of devastation. They didn't gather in a grand hall or a palace, but in a simple railway carriage parked under the trees, a setting as modest as it was meaningful. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, charged with an odd mixture of hope and bitterness. The Germans knew they had lost. Their armies were exhausted, their people starving, and their nation crumbling. The Allies, although victorious, were equally weary, having endured the horrors of trench warfare and the endless cycle of death. As they sat across from each other, a quiet but intense silence filled the carriage. Every word, every pen stroke, felt like it held the weight of the entire world. Outside, the forest was eerily still, as if nature itself was pausing to witness the end of a nightmare. The terms were read aloud, and one by one, the signatures were made, binding the future of nations and marking the official end of World War I. It was a moment of relief, yet it was not a moment of joy. Both sides understood that the scars of this war would remain for generations. Today, this place in the Compiègne Forest remains almost untouched, hidden from the bustling world that once relied on it to bring peace. For decades, the monument here has stood in silence, a stark reminder of the end of one of history's darkest chapters. But strangely, it has faded from the collective memory. As years passed, fewer people visited, and the world slowly turned its gaze away, letting this spot become overgrown, its significance sinking into obscurity. What's haunting about this forgotten monument is how, despite its importance, it has been left behind. A place that should have been revered as a symbol of peace now stands lonely and almost forgotten. Was it because the world wanted to move on? Did people prefer to forget the horrors tied to this forest and that railway carriage? These questions linger as you walk through the quiet pathways leading to the monument, surrounded by the whispering trees, each one holding memories of that fateful day. Yet, this spot's story doesn't end here. What few know is that this same place, this peaceful clearing, was thrust back into the spotlight just 2 decades later, but this time, under far darker circumstances. In 1940, as Europe once again found itself consumed by war, Adolf Hitler ordered his armies to push forward, sweeping across France with a brutal efficiency that shocked the world. Within weeks, France was forced to surrender, and Hitler saw an opportunity for a symbolic victory. He demanded that the surrender be signed at the exact same location, in the very same railway carriage where Germany had been humiliated years before. He wanted the world to witness France's defeat in the same spot where Germany had once been brought to its knees, a cruel act of revenge that would leave a mark on this place forever. The railway carriage was carefully moved back to its original position in the Compiègne Forest. As Hitler arrived, he took deliberate, measured steps, knowing that every eye was on him. In that moment, the forest that had once seen the end of World War I became a stage for a twisted reenactment, a dark inversion of the peace it had once symbolized. Hitler, standing in the very place where his country had once signed a document of defeat, now watched as the tables turned. The trees that had witnessed relief and hope in 1918 now stood silent witnesses to a scene filled with pride, vengeance, and fear. For Hitler, this was more than a military triumph, it was an act of symbolic domination. And for the people who remembered the significance of this spot, it was as though history itself was mocking them, turning a place of peace into a place of humiliation once more. But even this wasn't the end of the story. What happened next would ensure that this site, and that fateful railway carriage, would be forever shrouded in mystery. As the war continued, Hitler became increasingly paranoid about symbols that could threaten his image or inspire resistance. The railway carriage, now infamous as both a symbol of peace and a twisted trophy of revenge, had become more than just an object. It held a unique power, a reminder of Germany's past defeat and a mark of Hitler's temporary triumph. Fearing that it might one day be used against him, Hitler ordered the carriage removed from the Compiègne Forest. In a final act to erase any trace of Germany's previous humiliation, he commanded that the railway carriage be destroyed. By 1945, as the Allies advanced and Germany faced inevitable defeat once again, Hitler's forces followed through on his orders. The carriage was blown up and reduced to ashes, erasing a tangible piece of history. The exact spot in the forest was left empty, as if the past itself had been wiped away, leaving only the memory of what once was. But the forest remembers. Even without the carriage, the place still carries a strange weight, a feeling of history pressing down on those who visit. For those who know the story, the Compiègne Forest remains haunted by these two defining moments: first, the end of one world war, and then, a bitter reminder during the next. As visitors stand at this now empty monument, they can feel the eerie silence, as though the trees themselves hold the memories of peace and revenge, triumph and loss, forever entwined in the heart of the forest.